Hello and welcome. You're watching The Chase, Zimbabwe's premier current affairs program. Today we continue with the deportation of Zimbabweans living illegally in South Africa. However, there appears to be a glimmer of hope because an extension was granted till the end of the year, for those who have applied for appropriate visas before March the 31st. Now, picking up from last Tuesday's edition of The Chase, we spoke to South African Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, and we discussed this issue with him, and we heard the South African side of the story. Today, I'm joined by Zimbabwe's ambassador to South Africa, David Hamadziripi, to speak on our preparedness. Is Zimbabwe ready? And the steps that are being taken are going to be taken with the new developments. Our topic tonight on The Chase, returning SA-based Zimbabweans. Is Zimbabwe prepared? Join me and my guests tonight live on The Chase. Hello and welcome back. This is The Chase, Zimbabwe's premier current affairs program. I'm Andy Hodges. Tonight, as I said, I'm joined by Zimbabwe's ambassador to South Africa, David Hamadziripi, to speak on Zimbabwe's preparedness for the returning SA-based Zimbabweans, those who are legally there without visas, and what is being done in Zimbabwe to prepare ourselves for the influx of our citizens. Ambassador, welcome to The Chase, sir.
Thank you for having me on this platform. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Now, Ambassador, I'm going to jump straight into it. Now, the South African Department of Home Affairs on Wednesday extended the blanket concession for long-term visa or waiver applicants who are awaiting the outcomes of their applications. They've waived it until the end of the year. The department said the decision is with immediate effect, and those who have applied for visas on or before the 31st of March can legally remain in South Africa. Is this a culmination, Ambassador, of negotiations being held by your good office of the Zimbabwean government and, of course, the South African authorities?
This particular decision, which was announced on the 29th of March, has nothing to do with the Zimbabwean exemption permit holders. Neither is it exclusive to Zimbabweans. This is a decision that is applicable to all foreigners who have applied for visas here in South Africa. And as if you wish, when you look at the directive itself, it clearly identifies the individuals who are being addressed in this directive as long-term visa holders. And these could be those who have work visas, business visas, study visas, and also for those who are applying for waivers or whose visa applications are still pending. It's long-term visa holders. So it's not exclusive to Zimbabweans, neither does it apply at all to Zimbabwe exemption permit holders. Let me take this opportunity to advise the Zimbabwe exemption permit holders that the directive concerning the expiry of the Zimbabwe exemption permit on the 30th of June 2023 still stands. And therefore, our advice is please follow the procedures and the advice and the instruction to apply for a waiver or to apply for another visa in order to regularize their stay beyond 30 June 2023.
But Ambassador, I would assume, though, that because this exemption, as you said, it doesn't just apply to South Africa, to Zimbabweans, it applies to all foreigners, if I can call them that, living in South Africa. But you were obviously talking to the South African government to look at it from the Zimbabwean perspective, to look after our citizens. Were you not negotiating with the government in terms of how this process could be eased to help our citizens there in the country?
Not in this particular instance. Okay. In the past, we have engaged the South African government in terms of processing and expediting the issuance of visas for students or for other Zimbabweans who would have submitted their visa applications in Harare or elsewhere and who bring their cases to our attention. That is where we have had interventions. But the directive, if I may add, and draw your attention to it, is really to do with a challenge that South African Department of Home Affairs is having in processing these applications for waivers and for long-term visa holders. And this directive is intended to give the Department of Home Affairs of South Africa enough time to be able to clear the backlog that they are currently facing. The department was in Parliament last week, and they did indicate the level of backlog that they have. And it is indeed a matter of concern to the department, to the Parliament, but also to the applicants for those visas.
Let's talk numbers. Do you have any idea how many people, how many Zimbabwean citizens we're actually talking about? Because some of the numbers that we get in this country, you know, ranges from 200, 300, 400,000. Do you have any clear idea of the exact numbers who've either applied for exemption visas or those who may have to leave the country because they haven't got their paperwork in order?
We, as an embassy and even the consulates here, as you are aware, we have two consulates, one in Johannesburg and the other one in Cape Town. Neither any of us has any definitive information about the numbers of Zimbabweans that are in South Africa currently. We are aware, of course, now because of the information about the Zimbabwe exemption permit holders, we are aware of the number of Zimbabweans who hold the Zimbabwe exemption permit. But beyond that, we are not aware of the numbers of Zimbabweans who are here, either documented or undocumented, either in a regular status or in an irregular status in this country. No, we don't have that information.
So, but Ambassador, would that mean then that as we get up close to the date when these illegal Zimbabweans living in South Africa, I'll call them that for the moment, have to leave the country, I mean, surely then they may approach your embassy because they'd like to know what to do or whether there's help or assistance to be given by the embassy to repatriate them. I mean, you may find, sir, that you're inundated with hundreds of thousands of illegal Zimbabweans living in South Africa at your embassy doors. What would you say to that?
Let me clarify issues for you and for your viewers. What we have presently is if there are any Zimbabweans who are arrested for violating the immigration regulations and laws of this country, they are deported. And there is a process that is followed by the South African government in deporting those individuals. So we have a very clearly laid out process, and the process of deportation is ongoing. If I may inform you, we have 2 deportations per week from South Africa of Zimbabweans who would have violated South African immigration laws. What we are talking about, I believe, is the Zimbabwe exemption permit holders.
Ambassador, if I may jump in there. Okay, there are going to be Zimbabweans living in South Africa who either snuck across the border, they're illegal, they don't have paperwork, they haven't broken the law in South Africa, they're just working there illegally or under the radar, so to speak. I mean, what happens to them? Because obviously they would have to leave the country and they may seek your embassy's assistance. Is that not the case?
No, not to our experience so far. First and foremost, let me say that we do not support a irregular stay or illegal stay of Zimbabweans in South Africa. And that is why we always encourage our nationals here to make sure that they do have the permission to be in this country. Just as much as in Zimbabwe itself, foreigners should respect our immigration laws and they should be in the country with the necessary permission and documents. Those who are in an irregular status or those who don't have documents, if I may be honest with you, they are unlikely to come to the embassy, but they are likely to fall afoul of the laws of this country. And if they are caught, they will certainly be detained, and following due process, they will be deported to Zimbabwe. But the Zimbabwe exemption permit holders, who I believe are really the topical issue at the moment, what we do have is government has already commenced a process to plan for facilitation and assistance to be rendered to those who decide that they wish to go back home at the expiry of their permits, that is 30 June, and also those who decide that they want to go home. because,
Can you take us through that
migration.
process then? I mean, you said that government has put in place measures. Can you take us through the process? If I'm an exemption holder, but I decide I want to come home, I approach the embassy and say, I need to come home, repatriate me. Can you just take us through exactly what the Zimbabwean government and your embassy has put in place to make the repatriation easier back to Zimbabwe?
Yes, what we have done is we need to know who these Zimbabwe exemption permit holders are. We need to know their profile. We also need to know what their needs are so that we can best respond to those needs. So in Zimbabwe itself, we have an interministerial committee which has been established, which is already operational, and this is both at cabinet level and at officials level. Here at the embassy, what we have done is we've launched an online registration platform since beginning of February, where we have invited the Zimbabwe exemption permit holders to register so that we can capture the information that we need in order to then feed into the processes in Zimbabwe and then come up with the necessary facilities and resources to support those who need the support. As we speak, so in addition to the online registration platform, we have also decided to embark on what we are calling an in-person ZEP mapping exercise. So as I speak right now, we are right at the tail end of that exercise, which commenced on the 13th of March, and we have had teams going out to all the 9 provinces here in South Africa. So we have presently a team in KwaZulu-Natal province in Durban. We have another team in Vredenburg in Western Cape province, and a third team which is in Johannesburg in Gauteng province. So at the end of this process, it's going to end tomorrow. Our teams are composed of members of staff from the embassy and from the consulates, and also officials who are part of the interministerial committee who came from Harare specifically for this purpose. And once we have completed the exercise tomorrow, we'll of course sit down and look at the numbers, look at the information that has been submitted, and then the authorities and the committee in Harare or in Zimbabwe will then finalize the necessary preparations to assist those who seek that assistance. Let me hasten to add in this respect that there are 2 aspects to what the government of Zimbabwe is saying it's going to try and do to support those who choose to come home. In the first place, we are talking of assistance, and there could be assistance in terms of even repatriation, transport assistance from South Africa all the way back to Zimbabwe. Then there is the facilitation, and this is in the form of waivers of, say, customs regulations, facilitation in terms of establishment of business back home, facilitation in terms of just reintegration. In talking about the waivers, because this question is being raised quite often, some people have got the mistaken view that the assistance is already commenced being delivered. It has not yet commenced being delivered because we are still in that process where we are gathering the information. A lot of the individuals who have indicated that they want to come back home are indicating that they would wish to do so in May or in June. So very close to the time of the deadline.
There's 2 issues that I'd like to talk to you about, which are views that are commonly held or shared here in Zimbabwe. The first, let's deal with both of them separately. The first, of course, is the perception that a lot of Zimbabweans who may not have fallen foul of the law in South Africa are still criminals, and therefore the fear is that there may be an influx of hardened or hardcore criminals coming back to the country. And that fills obviously some Zimbabweans with a little bit of trepidation. What would you say to comments like that is floating around here in the country?
Well, in the first place, let me be very open. A Zimbabwean is a Zimbabwean, whether they are law-abiding or they are law-breakers. That is a fact. So they are Zimbabweans, and we cannot deny them entry into the country just because they are criminals. They are our nationals. what is happening even now as we speak, when we have deportations of individuals who have just broken the immigration regulations, but we also have individuals who have completed their sentences in prisons here in South Africa for some very horrible crimes, but they are admitted back home. So the government is indeed aware of that risk and that threat that you may have among those who return individuals who are of a criminal character. And I'm sure measures will be put in place to ensure that we reduce incidents of criminality attributed to those who will be coming back from South Africa.
So the second issue I'd like to talk about is also the fear or belief that's going around circles here in Zimbabwe, in that there may be so many hundreds of thousands of Zimbabweans returning that it could overstretch the economy, because already jobs are hard to find, and a lot of the economy is informal sector. About 80% of Zimbabwe's economy, as you know, sir, is informal. So as a result, we're trying to absorb hundreds of thousands of people, whether legal or illegal, who are having to return home. And we don't just have the capacity to give them enough jobs or to give them the necessary work or ways to make a living. I mean, is that also something that Zimbabweans should be concerned about?
I think we should avoid having a very negative perception and perspective on the possible return of some of our nationals from South Africa. If anything, I think we should be positive about it in terms of looking at the possibilities and opportunities that do arise following the return of the nationals. Quite a lot of these nationals, particularly those who are on the Zimbabwe exemption permit, are gainfully employed here in South Africa. Some of them have acquired skills, others they are even running their own businesses here in South Africa. So they are coming back home not just with equipment and already business ideas, but they're also coming back with investment possibilities. They're coming back with knowledge and skills that they've acquired, which they can put to good use and contribute to the attainment of Vision 2030 back home. So yes, indeed, we will have some who may need extra assistance, but I believe in the majority, we are going to be getting a lot who are returning to Zimbabwe, who will make a huge contribution, substantive contribution to the growth of the economy. Just as much as they are doing here in South Africa, a lot of the Zimbabwean exemption permit holders are contributing quite significantly to the growth and development of the economy of South Africa.
Ambassador, one of the things, of course, which is a concern is that the South African authorities may cherry pick and decide to keep the skilled workers, the very highly skilled Zimbabwean workers, because obviously it suits them for them to remain in the economy, and those less skilled or those less employable, they're happy to see go in a way, in a way getting rid of, if I can call it that, unskilled or skilled labor that they want. I mean, that's not something that you anticipate South Africans will do, is it, or not?
I do not get that impression. Clearly, you are touching on an issue which is not just confined to South Africa, but this is a matter to do with migration policy, which is exercised and deployed by many countries all over the world. So clearly, in general, governments try to attract migrants who have certain contributions that they can make to the country's economy. So you'll find in many instances, governments may put in place policies that make it easier for individuals who are making huge investments or individuals who have certain sought-after skills to be able to settle in their country, in their economy. And clearly, they try by all means to make it very difficult for those who may be seen as a burden on their countries and economies and keep them out. Mm-hmm. But what we have today is you are touching on an issue to do with a decision that has been taken by the government of South Africa, where they have identified what they call a critical skills list, which has now been, in fact, which had been brought down to about 17 skills, but it has been increased to, I think, 53 now. And essentially, when you go through that list, you see that these are the skills that the government of South Africa feels are needed in order to improve the performance of the economy and in order to bring innovation into the economy.
Ambassador, if I may, I mean, you may be a Zimbabwean who has an exemption permit and goes to reapply for one and be rejected. So as a result, you are legal, and as a result, you could have your own documentation problems. Is your embassy geared up to deal with Zimbabweans who don't have Zimbabwean documentation, or they need to upgrade it, or they need to renew their documentation? Are you well equipped there in South Africa to handle a possible large influx of Zimbabweans requiring new documentation or rolling over their original documentation?
In terms of our current staff complement, if we do have a large influx of applicants for those documents, we may not be able to meet that demand. But whenever we have had such cases where there is a huge demand for documentation from our nationals, we have been able to draw upon additional staff from Zimbabwe itself and also employ other short-term staff here in South Africa in order to assist us to do so. We have also, in the past, embarked on mobile missions to various provinces because, as I indicated, our consulates are in Cape Town and in Johannesburg. But we need also to reach other places or nationals who are living in other places outside of Johannesburg and outside of Cape Town. And we have, in the past, once in a while, also undertaken such exercises to make it easier for our nationals to apply for birth certificates.
By Zimbabwe's ambassador to South Africa, David Hamanzi-Ripi. And of course, our topic this evening, returning SA-based Zimbabweans. Is Zimbabwe prepared? Don't go away, The Chase. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching The Chase, Zimbabwe's premier current affairs program. This is ZTN Prime, broadcasting to you live from ZTN studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Our topic this evening, returning SA-based Zimbabweans. Is Harare ready? Of course, today we're talking about the whole issue of the deportation or repatriation of Zimbabweans who are living in South Africa illegally, that don't have qualified exemption permits or the right documentation in South Africa. And of course, my guest this evening is Zimbabwe's ambassador to South Africa, David Hamanzi-Ripi. Ambassador, you spoke about your teams out in the provinces, in Cape Town, in Gauteng and everywhere. Is this about educating Zimbabwean residents or Zimbabweans in South Africa about what they need to do, the law? Because I know a lot of people, they may read about this, but they don't know the finite details of exactly what they need to do, where they need to apply, when they need to get their documentation in, etc. Is this about an education strategy that your embassy is following in South Africa?
This is an outreach program that we are having to our nationals who are outside of our established provinces or locations. We do, of course, occasionally and regularly, whenever we have an opportunity, to address our nationals, to inform them about the need to have proper documents and proper permits to be in South Africa. And of course, we brief them about the facilities that we have and the services that we offer at the consulates to enable them to be able to apply for those documents. That is Zimbabwean civil documents like the birth certificate and the passports.
Ambassador, so, I mean, okay, maybe this is a bit of a recap, but if you're talking to Zimbabweans now in South Africa who maybe need to get their documents together or get them in order, what would your recommendations be to those citizens? What they should be doing now up to the end of March and even up to the end of 2023? What should Zimbabweans be doing?
Our message is constant and consistent, and that is they must make sure that they have the proper permits, the proper documents to be in South Africa. As you are aware, Zimbabwe and South Africa have a visa-free regime. So Zimbabwean passport holders can visit South Africa without the requirement of a visa. So they can enter South Africa and they can be issued with a visa at the airport, and this would give them a maximum of 90 days stay in the country. And if they want to work, there are requirements that they should apply and obtain a work visa in order for them to be gainfully employed, study visas, etc. So we do educate our nationals that on those requirements. Clearly, we are not the ones who administer the issuance of those visas, but we inform our nationals of the need for them to apply for those visas and, of course, direct them to the necessary offices where they can apply for those visas.
Ambassador, it's actually very good talking to you, because one thing, of course, that has worried many Zimbabweans were the reports or the alleged reports of rising xenophobia in South Africa, particularly geared towards South Africans. And so this sort of feeds into the narrative. Xenophobia rising, suddenly new laws that seems to kick out Zimbabweans from South Africa. I mean, as you clarified earlier, it isn't just Zimbabweans who are being covered by this new act in South Africa. But there is still that fear that Zimbabweans are being targeted, there's xenophobia rising, and Zimbabwe is actually, in South Africa, some of them allegedly are still living in fear. What are you seeing on the ground there about the rise of xenophobia and how South Africans are treating, if I can call us, their brothers from across the Limpopo?
Well, we are deeply, deeply concerned whenever we read or hear about comments that are made by individuals, by organizations, even by some leaders of political parties here in South Africa that would be targeted at foreigners in general or at Zimbabweans in particular, because this certainly creates a very difficult, a very uncomfortable environment for our nationals. Let me hasten to add that in our engagements with the South African government, they assure us that indeed they have a policy that welcomes foreigners and that welcomes Zimbabweans to be here. But what they also want is that those foreigners, including Zimbabweans who are here, must respect the laws of this country. And therefore, their main fight is against what they term illegal migrants in this country. Although I prefer to use the term irregular migrant, because really, as you are aware, even at the international level, the objective is to promote regular and orderly migration. But you do get irregular migration where individuals do come in and they stay without obtaining the necessary permissions to do so. I also want to stress and to assure you that even the decision that was taken by South Africa, it is not one way they are saying they are kicking out Zimbabweans, but they are merely saying this particular permit, which was the Zimbabwe exemption permit, is now coming to an end. It was temporary anyway, because when it was issued in the first place, it had an end date. So the individuals who have the Zimbabwe exemption permit have been given the opportunity or are being invited to apply for other visas. Whether it is easy for them to obtain those visas is another matter. But they have been invited to apply for those for other visas in order to
Yeah, earlier on you mentioned that the government has put in place plans to assist with repatriation, possibly to help resettlement and so forth. Are you doing it alone? Because obviously this may cost a lot of money. Are you doing it alone, or have you found any partnerships or international partners, people like the International Labour Organization and people like that, who you're working with to bring Zimbabwean citizens back, or is this Zimbabwe government able to stand on its own and do it themselves?
No, in this particular process, we are actually engaging international partners. Specifically, we are engaging the International Organization for Migration. As you may be aware, and this was widely reported, His Excellency the President had a meeting with the Director General of the International Organization for Migration on the sidelines of the AU summit in Addis Ababa recently. And in fact, there is an agreement that the IOM will be helping us as the government of Zimbabwe from a technical perspective, because as you may be aware, IOM is the specialized UN agency responsible for migration issues. And then secondly, in terms of financial mobilization, because clearly whatever support we can give and we are going to be able to give to those who do return home demand some resources, and those resources, we may not easily have them within our own budget. And
Ambassador, I have to jump in there because unfortunately we are coming to the end of the show, but I would like to thank you for joining us on The Chase. Of course, this is Zimbabwe's Ambassador to South Africa, David Hamanzi-Ripi. Thank you, sir, for being with us on The Chase this evening.
Thank you very much.
I think there you have it. I think the Zimbabwe's ambassador to South Africa has clarified the issue concerning returning residents or those without permits. So the end result is this: 31st of March is the date, end of the year, the extension's being given. So get your papers legal in South Africa, and if you aren't, the embassy is there to assist you and to give you advice. But I think the point is this: follow the laws of the country and no problems will come to you. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye. Have a good evening, and you all be safe.